It's 2021. Zomato becomes the first Indian unicorn startup to list publicly on the Indian stock markets. Things are going fine for the first 5 months as the stock price grows by almost 22%. But there are some severe cracks that are being developed along the way. Zomato's Q&Q revenue growth was flattish, losses have been widening, and the stock prices was down by almost 64% from its peak. But this is where Deepinder Goyal is built different. He managed to bounce back stronger than ever by focusing on the right acquisitions and building them the right way. What's the result? Today, Zomato is a $30 billion company, profitable, and is now the market leader in almost all categories that it operates. Which is why in this episode, we'll talk about Zomato's strategy, why they've chosen to be in certain businesses, and also the marketing and growth that has helped them to reach its peak. So with that said, let's perspectify the shit out of this.
So Zomato broadly has four businesses within itself. The first is of course Zomato, the food delivery service, which we all know and love. The second is Hyperpure, which is their B2B segment for restaurants. What that essentially means is that whenever restaurants need vegetables, poultry, etc., they would go to Hyperpure and get those things delivered in bulk, right? The third is Blinkit, which we all know and we have done an episode on covering them in detail. And the fourth is Events and Offline, which is the going outs business. And it's in the news recently because there's been some talks of them acquiring the Paytm events business and also creating a different app out of it. And we'll obviously talk about it. But the biggest misconception among people is that this is a very diversified strategy. And maybe diversification is bad because Zomato isn't really focusing on just one thing. But this is where I completely disagree. And I think that it is one of the best strategies that any company in India has ever applied. And to understand this strategy, what you first need to understand is what is an S curve, right? To tell you simply, right, S curve is basically divided into three phases. The first phase, where there isn't a lot of growth and you're spending most of your money in building your brand and your technology, that is called the innovation phase. Using that innovation phase, you then go to the growth phase. And finally comes the fade phase. What that essentially means is beyond a point in time, because of market limitation, which we'll talk about it in a moment, and because of multiple other factors, you're not able to grow your business as fast as possible, right? And if you look at the food delivery business alone of Zomato and Swiggy, what you'll realize is that these businesses are not growing as fast as people expect them to grow. For example, if you look at the FY23 numbers and compare it to FY24 numbers of Zomato, what you'll realize is that Zomato only added 8% new transacting users in this period versus 16% in FY23, which clearly shows that there is a sort of decay happening in this segment, right? And the reason is simple because Swiggy and Zomato have already deeply penetrated into all of India. Zomato alone is in 1000 cities, right? And because both Zomato and Swiggy have spent so much amount of marketing dollars behind their brands that this isn't anymore an awareness and a top of the mind recall issue anymore, which is why Zomato is currently focusing just on increasing the frequency of orders, which means that they want to basically get more orders per customer. And the second thing is that they want to increase the AOV of their customers. And the reason why I'm saying this is that both of these things are very low in India as of now. If we look at China, for example, right? The average order value in China is approximately 560 rupees, which is approximately $7. Do you know what that is in India?
Nope.
It's around rupees 220 to 250 rupees, right? It's almost, it's more than 2x of on a per order basis, right? The second thing is that Indians generally don't like to order as much, right? If we look at an aggregate level, Zomato's repeat purchase per month is just 2 to 3 times versus what you get in China, which can be upwards of 24 times every single month.
That's very interesting, right, Rakshit? Because now that we're like talking about how engagement and increasing AOV, increasing the order frequency has become more important for some of these players. We're also seeing this trend with the likes of even for example, I think recently Swiggy introduced this reorder feature on their app, which I found very peculiar because it's barely like two steps extra for me to just go and find my previous order and reorder it again. But now I feel like they're using any kind of product intervention to actually increase the frequency of
Exactly.
orders at a faster pace. Right,
Exactly.
for consumers.
Exactly.
That's just a hypothesis. I don't know if that's actually the case, but I
Yeah.
feel like that might be the case.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Absolutely. Because as I said, you've already deeply penetrated into like 1000 cities. Beyond, matlab, if you go, and majority of your orders out of those 1000 cities, 65% of your orders are coming from 65 cities, right? Top 65
Yeah.
cities. So the thing is that you can't go into more cities because going into more cities will not lead to additional revenue generation, right? So there are a lot of macroeconomic factors which need to come into play for this business to really grow further now from here, right? Number one is that households, like people need to move out from their cities, go into emigrate within India, right? Because that's where, because if you look at cities like Bangalore and Gurgaon, that's where you get most of your orders because people are outside their homes. They don't get a lot of home food, so they tend to order more outside. And the second factor, which is kind of like which is a factor which is there for every single thing out there, is that the per capita income needs to rise, right? So if the per capita income rises, more people will go out seeking better opportunities. They will have more money that they can spend towards building their business, right? So I think overall level pay, their main focus for both Zomato as well as Swiggy is to basically increase their AOV and increase
Yeah.
frequency of orders, right? And Zomato has basically built interesting features in order to do both of these things. What we have basically categorized this into like four things. The first is Zomato Everyday, right? Zomato Everyday is a feature in which Zomato has basically partnered up with a lot of home chefs, and this service is primarily present in Delhi NCR. But there are according to their last quarter's earnings call, they're planning to increase this service to other cities right now as well. So here the interesting concept is that they've Zomato has partnered up with a lot of home chefs, and they're kind of giving a tiffin service at a relatively low cost, which is in the range of approximately 250 to 300 rupees, right? Because Zomato is involved over here, they can focus on quality as well as they can really focus on building the entire supply chain for these home chefs, right? The second thing is Zomato Gold. Now, this is a very interesting service. I think I am a user of it. I don't know about you, but this is basically to increase frequency as well as average order value, because Zomato Gold only gets activated once you sort of go, I think, beyond 150, 200 rupees. And because you're not paying any fee for delivery and all of those things, the hypothesis over there, I'm guessing, would be to increase the number of orders of a Zomato Gold user, because you're paying, let's say, 200 rupees a quarter, so you would want to make the most out of that. The third is Zomato Legends, right? This is a service which was recently brought back in, and it is primarily to increase the average order value because, according to new rules of Zomato Legends, you need to have a minimum order of 5,000 rupees for you to order something from another city. And the last thing that they're doing, and this is a very interesting thing, and it's only in Delhi NCR as of now, is they're really focusing on handling the group orders better. Because what they realized was that there are people who are ordering 5,000 to 10,000 rupees ke item as well, right? Because of a home party or whatever, right? And on top of these things, now that Zomato commands a market share in the food delivery space, they can actually do a lot more things with respect to increasing their, like, generating revenue both from the restaurant side of the business as well as from the customers. That can be by levying commissions on restaurants and serving them with ads, which can basically increase their take rate from around 20% to maybe 30, 35, 40, even 40%, right? And for the consumers, it is obviously handling charges, platform fees, payment gateway charges, all of these things, which just adds more into the revenue of Zomato. But with all of these things said, right, the food delivery business of Zomato is still not growing as fast as people would expect. 8 to 10% is not a very high growth rate, which is why Dipinder Goyal has heavily invested in building Hyperpure, has invested in now building the if going out business, and is investing in Blinkit heavily, right? And the idea, and very soon, both Blinkit as well as Hyperpure will cross Zomato's food delivery business ka revenue, right?
In fact, Rakshit, I was reading the letter to shareholders by Zomato, and there is this specific line by Dipinder Goyal where he says that he follows this philosophy of Simon Sinek's book called The Infinite Game, where the primary motive of any business should be to thrive and survive in the long run, right? That's what keeps the business going, for which they probably have to keep diversifying, keep figuring out new trends, right? Which is why they also call the internal name for Zomato is actually eternal, right? But he also says that they don't want to publicly create or publicly name the company eternal, because one is obviously it becomes boastful, and second is if they inherently believe it's eternal, they won't keep innovating and disrupting the market in that sense, right? So very
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And talking about Dipinder Goyal, right? And this is why he is the greatest of all time in the Indian startup space. And in order to make his business durable, that in order for him to continuously grow his top line as well as bottom line, he shouldn't just focus on the food delivery segment, but he needs to add more businesses which are either at the cusp of going through the growth phase in the S curve or are already in the growth phase, right? And this might sound a bit complex, so stay with me here, right? So, Zomato's food delivery business is profitable, it generates revenue and brings in some serious cash flow. That cash can be used to buy other businesses like Blinkit or invest further in businesses like Hyperpure, which are actually in at the cusp of going through the growth phase in the S curve, right? Obviously, Blinkit and Hypergrow will also at some point in time come to the come to the fade away phase in the S curve, which essentially means ki they'll stop growing as fast as they are right now. And as these new businesses are at the growth stage of the S curve, they will continue to add more revenue onto the Zomato's top line and will continue to grow faster than the food delivery business. So while they may burn some cash, the idea is that they will add more to the top line of Zomato. And because food delivery business of Zomato is already profitable, it will take care of the bottom line. And as these bets start going through the third stage of the S curve, that is when Dipinder Goyal and Zomato will start generating serious amount of cash from them, and those businesses will start contributing more to the bottom line at that point in time. Zomato can then use that cash that these businesses generate to essentially invest into new businesses. Now, this is a very this strategy in India is quite new because I personally haven't seen a lot of companies do that. But I can draw some parallels of Zomato to what Meta did when it first went public. Just before they went public, they actually bought. They sort of understood that Facebook was not growing as fast as some as they would like to. So they invested in buying Instagram. They invested in buying WhatsApp, Instagram was burning a lot of money for Facebook, it is now one of its most profitable ventures. And now Facebook is using the cash that Instagram generates to put it in things like VR, AR.
And this is the classic acquisition strategy, right? I mean, a lot of us have read this in our business textbooks, right? But even with the likes, I mean, you'd see the big conglomerates do this at scale, right? You have Meta, even Alphabet, for example, right, had acquired so many businesses along its way and kept converting it into new businesses, right? Even I think AdWords also was initially acquired as one startup and then it was converted into AdWords. Double click, right? And then you had Fitbit, and there's so many acquisitions, right? And you see these businesses following the exact same model of you're acquiring the S-curve sort of firms and building off of that, right? So very interesting.
Absolutely. So now let's go to the second part of things, right? Why did Zomato focus on only these three businesses right now? So um, so the answer is simple, right? Like Meta and Mark Zuckerberg know how to build network effects and how to build social networks. Dipinder Goyal and Zomato know how to build marketplace, logistics, and services related to them, right? All of these three businesses that I just spoke about fall into either one or both of these categories. So if you look at, let's say, Hyperpure, the insight was simple. Zomato onboards restaurants and there is a huge problem with respect to having a broken supply chain, right? With food materials. And Zomato having deep relationship with the restaurant will make the restaurants trust them even more. And as they solve for the demand and supply side problem for both the demand side of the problem, which is basically bringing in more customers, and suddenly if you start solving the supply side of the problem, you're kind of locked into Zomato ka ecosystem, right? Secondly, for Blinkit, I think for anyone who wants to understand more about Blinkit, I would highly suggest you watch an entire Blinkit episode. But just from a Zomato strategy perspective, I think Zomato has tried multiple times to get into grocery, and Dipinder Goyal really understands how the grocery business works, even though those experiments might have failed, right? But with Blinkit, I think there is a logistics side of things, and there is a marketplace that you need to build. And I think both of these things fall into the forte of Zomato. There is the going out business, right? And I think that is, as a strategy, is a very important one, because as we spoke about, right, Indians order just 2 to 3 times a day, right? And by not participating in the going outs business, you're basically losing out on a huge portion of the value creation. And by not being part of the customer journey while he is going out, there is a loss of top of the mind recall as well, right? So I think in order to create value for both Zomato as well as for customers, I think it's important and because Zomato understands the marketplace business, they can become a huge player in this segment. And lastly, a very small point, but I think it's super important to really talk about this, is that Zomato, except for the going out business, which is now being converted into a separate app altogether, all of these three businesses have separate apps, have separate services, right? And they operate quite independently. I think there are like three benefits of doing that, and this might sound very counterintuitive because when you think about it, you're like, yeah, if I'm making a separate app, I will have to spend separate marketing on that app. And, there is this huge amount of DAU that comes from Zomato. So I might be losing out on that by not giving these services to the user. But the counterintuitive insight is that when you have like a completely separate business, right? Because Blinkit and Zomato are like completely two separate businesses altogether. You're kind of forfeiting the app design of one service to the other service when the requirements can be completely different.
Yeah.
And when you have like two different services into one platform, there is like immense amount of conflict of exploration within the team. कि मेरे को मिलना चाहिए versus नहीं मिलना चाहिए,
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
those things. And by completely separating out the businesses in terms of app, in terms of everything, you are basically giving everyone the opportunity to just sort of, you know, uh, run it independently and do what's right for their business versus
Yeah.
thinking about the whole thing. So I think super interesting strategy by Zomato. And
True.
yeah, I think, but what's more interesting is their marketing side of things because they go viral a lot of times. So yeah, Dhruv, why don't you talk about it?
So, getting onto the marketing side of this episode, right? We had the lucky opportunity to talk to a few people from the inside of Zomato, right? And we learned a lot of interesting things. One being that at a very broad marketing level, right? Zomato's primary focus for a long period of time until the IPO had been branding, right? Which is why they had big branding teams, right? And not just lead generation, because I mean all of us understand that Zomato is too big to just focus on a few acquiring a few customers here and there, right? They have gone very very broad, right? And post the IPO, obviously Zomato gained massive amounts of recognition with just the IPO talk itself. After which they realized that what, we have to shift our focus a lot more on engagement, that is engagement on the marketing channels, rather than just sort of doing very very acquisition focused campaigns, right? An interesting thing I learned from one of Ranveer Alabadia's videos, right, with Deepinder Goyal, was that, so Deepinder says is that the goal for marketing is just bringing smiles to people's faces, right? And I really love that, because it's unlike anybody thinks of in the marketing space, right? Which is just getting people engaged, building that top of the mind recall, and establishing that connect with the Gen Z and millennial audiences, which are primarily their target market, right? For a lot of us, in my particular case, I mean, if you guys don't know this, Swiggy was the earliest entrant into the food delivery business in 2014, after which Zomato caught on in 2015, right? Swiggy had already established a massive dominance just with being the first mover, right? So I had personally downloaded Swiggy, and I still continue to use Swiggy for a very long period of time, because as it goes with a lot of the apps that are very similar, or companies that are very similar, the first mover gets a big advantage, right? But with the likes of Zomato, they realize that the way to counter Swiggy is not going to be through directly trying to target and acquire people. It's to stand out from the crowd with these interesting engagement focused campaigns, right? And that is how I got to sort of download Zomato, because I'm like, what, these guys are also making a dent in the food delivery space, right? So I feel like they have pursued a very different line of strategy to acquire people, right? Now, coming to their broad level marketing strategy, and we'll talk about everything from SEO, social media ads, etc., but more understanding the core principles of how they've actually built this massive engine, right? Now, if we talk about SEO, right, obviously you have to understand that a lot of their market is still coming from organic search, right? So let's say, Rakshit, you decide that one day you want to visit a cafe with your girlfriend, right? The first thing you probably do is, yeah, hey, what are the cafes near me in, let's say, Gurgaon, right? And if Zomato or the likes of any food delivery service or restaurant services are in this are showing up on your feed or on Google searches, right? They've obviously won the game, right? And for Zomato being the conglomerate it has become, which is hyper pure, Blinkit, food delivery, going out, right? Anybody and everybody searching for any kind of food related items online is essentially their market, right? Now, very interestingly, Zomato has an 18 million traffic on a monthly level, right? And that absolutely,
Interesting.
like kind of blows my mind, right? Swiggy stands at 5 million, right, which is far, far, far behind. Right, and obviously one thing here to note is that Zomato also operates the whole menu side of things, like the whole directory of restaurants, right, which is why they have such a big traffic coming
Yeah.
in, right, and it becomes
Yeah.
a very big funnel for acquisition from the top of the funnel, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funny fact, right? So we'll put up the screenshot of the traffic of the competitors in India for Zomato, but at the bottom left there is a yellow dot, and I happened to click on it to see which company this was, and it happens to be Rameshwaram Cafe, which we just I just burst into laughter as soon as I saw that, because I was like, how is Rameshwaram getting so much traffic on search as a competitor among the players like Zomato and Swiggy? It was too hilarious, right? And I feel like we might have to do that as a separate episode on a later date. But yeah, that's hilarious, right? On another note, right? So Zomato ranks on nearly all the keywords for near me, right? So if you look at 18 million traffic, out of that a good 20 to 25% chunk, which is a very very which is essentially the majority chunk, is coming in from near me keywords, right, which I initially explained to you, right. So bars near me, restaurants near me, cafes near me, right. An interesting thing is from 2013 to 17, right, this research showed that out of the kind of queries that people ask on Google, right, which is like for me, should I, all these kind of things, should I do this, or something for me, you'd see that near me, right, was one of the biggest keywords that got huge amounts of growth, right. So this grew by 900% in that span of time, right, and we'll post the screenshot also on this on the video here, right, which means that this query was getting exponential amounts of growth, right. And another thing, in case you don't know, right? So, near me, to rank for near me searches, is essentially an aspect of SEO called local SEO, right? Which is nothing but localization of SEO, trying to optimize your search or your ranking for people searching within a specific region, right? Now, a few factors that Google considers here is things like, do you have an established Google business profile? Do you have keywords in your title and headers that match exactly the search people are conducting? And also a very big factor is online reviews, right? Ki aapke website pe how many reviews are you getting, or probably Google pe how many reviews are you getting for this particular restaurant, right? Now, for Zomato, it's like a joke to crack this, right? Because if you think about it, Zomato is essentially a directory of every restaurant in every region, right? I try to search this up. I try to search up, restaurants in my region, which is Holy Mabu, very small area in Bangalore, right? Restaurants here, restaurants in Gurgaon, restaurants in sector XYZ, right? You have them ranking everywhere, and also with the amount of reviews Zomato gets, right? Very high, highly engaged audience posting reviews on Zomato every single day, right? I try to check it up, and almost on a 24-hourly level, people are posting reviews for restaurants, right? That is a massive factor for Google, saying that, hey, this particular directory is getting huge amounts of reviews, and hence it becomes an important source for any local SEO, right? So very interesting sort of take on how they've been building their their whole traffic, right?
What people forget is that Zomato actually started in 2008 or 2009, and for the first 6-7 years they were actually just a listing business.
Correct.
Right? They were not doing food delivery. Food
Exactly.
delivery started in 2015.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not at all surprised
Exactly.
that nobody has been able to crack this except for Zomato.
Exactly, right. It's not even a joke, right? I mean, they've been in this industry for like almost 15-20 years now, and obviously they've built up insane amounts of search volume just posting restaurant directories, right? So pretty interesting, right? Moving on to their social media, right? Now, I had a chance to speak to someone from their team who worked with their team for a while, right? And what he told me was that for the social media team, approvals, so taking approvals was never an important factor. Right now, in most cases, right, Rakshit, like whenever we operate marketing teams, and even in our team, right, at my company, we are very careful with how our brand shows up on social media, because essentially it's like this, right? You hire people and you fear that, what if they go out and say something that could potentially be controversial, right, and might damage or tarnish your brand image, right? Like you'd never want that, right? Which is why there are multiple filters in the process, right? Like the creative team gives the review to probably one senior management team. Senior management then takes it further to the CMO, and then it goes out, right? Usually that's the process, how it looks like, right? But in Zomato's case, what stumped me was that these guys allow all the creative teams complete authority to go out and post anything, right? Which is why they have so many stimulating campaigns on social media, which sometimes do insanely well, sometimes massively backfire, right? Like if you remember, there's this MCBC ka campaign that they're posted, right?
Okay. I don't know about it. Talk to me.
Yes, I don't remember the exact what was the full form, but I think it was like Mac Chicken or something, and they put out MCBC, and it was like food items, right? And they posted like this banner on, I think, one of the highways, and it just got a lot of hate also on social media, a lot of good response also from probably the Gen Zs, but then the millennials were like, this is going overboard, folks, right? So that was damn funny. But the interesting thing to note here is that as a food delivery brand which wants to, again, A, stand out, and B, make you shift to their sort of, their app, they have to be willing to take such audacious bets, right? And I'm even thinking, right, like a lot of the time you'd see these controversial things go out, which actually give a lot more, eyeballs onto these matters, right, or onto the people involved in these matters, right? Which is a common sight, right? So for a brand like Zomato, it's essentially these stimulating campaigns is a hit they're willing to take. And also I think there was this whole wedge campaign that they launched recently.
I was just about to.
So in case you guys don't know this, they called out that, hey, our delivery partners will be wearing green, signifying that they're delivering veg food. Now that again got a lot of backlash from the community at large, right? Lot of backlash, right? But they were humble enough to go out on social media and apologize also, which actually shows the high amounts of understanding of PR for the brand, right? Ki I'm not taking approvals, I'm going to go out and post content, but in case it backfires, the whole team gets together, brainstorms on how to damage control, right? Another very important aspect of essentially socials and PR, right? So and I think one last thing here is to note, right? I think as you were discussing, Rakshit, initially, that they have different teams focusing on just Blinkit ka app, different teams on Zomato ka app, right? And how the independence model works so well. They have actually created that on a social media level, right? Which actually tells you how deeply involved they are with each and every aspect of their business, right? To give an example, if you try to search Zomato on different social media platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, you realize that the content across all of them is completely different. They're not actually repurposing and posting the exact same content everywhere, which is what most people do. They have a team that is curating content just for LinkedIn, just for Twitter, just for Instagram, right? I'm not sure if they have just a team working on one platform, but the focal points are split very clearly on platform focused content, right? And that is the biggest winner anyone could get, because at the end of the day, you have to think of social media also like a marketplace, right? LinkedIn has a separate market, Instagram has a separate market, right? You can't just blast same content everywhere unless you're like a very small brand, you don't know what else to do, right? So now coming to the very interesting part for the performance marketers, right, which is their ad strategy. Now, Zomato spends roughly 1,000 crores per year on just advertising, right? And I'm assuming a large share of the pie would be going to TVCs, probably Meta, right? You'd see huge amounts of advertising that is going towards engagement-focused campaigns, so like even billboards, etc. Right? Now, while speaking to someone at Zomato, right, I think one thing that stood out for me very interestingly was that they said that they're not afraid to try new things, right? So that's the philosophy they are spreading among the teams, right? Which is that you go out and continuously try a lot of things, and even if you fail, it's completely okay, right? And I think that mentality is not peddled among most of the teams in most companies, right? They're very focused on a success metric, right? Like I've spoken to a lot of head marketers, a lot of companies, and it's like, yaar, मेरे को DIY के end पे I need this sale, and everything that ties back to the sale is what I can show, I can measure. Hence, I'm just going to do these things, right? Which is why most of these companies will just be running basic performance marketing campaigns, everything driving towards this one success metric, right? And people are too afraid to do things where you can't entirely measure the outcome, right? But if you look at Zomato, these guys have absolutely killed it in terms of experimenting. Like, let's not forget their Pornhub campaign, right? Where wherein yes, slightly cringe, but the team does rely on quick ideas and execution. Like I was just reading one of the blogs where they written that, one fine day they realized that, what, after consuming content on this platform, which is Pornhub, people also tend to get hungry. Hence, it might be a good idea to set up a quick campaign trying to do that, right? So, I mean, this brand is insane. Like, these guys have no fear of morals and ethics and all, right? They're just, wherever it seems fit, they're going out and doing it, which is insane for me, right? And I think one of the things they also mentioned was that the CPCs on this platform were really low, barely like some $0.03 per click, right? And another thing I realized that this was again marketed on their other platform, right? Like social media and their blog also, for instance, right? So you see how they try these offbeat things and then they post it everywhere, right? And then they make content out of it, right? See, again, showcasing themselves as the brand standing out among everybody in the market, right? Very smart, very audacious is the word for these people. Very audacious, very ballsy. And for those of you who are interested in joining the community where we are hosting such interesting debates and discussions, the link is in the description. We run a beautiful community called the Perspective community. A lot of interesting conversations there. So head out and we'll see you there. Yeah. I think with that said, we can now move on to the last segment of this of their marketing, which I found very interesting, right? While speaking to someone again, now a lot of the big companies usually, as far as we have seen in a lot of the episodes we have done, which is like Mokobara, Blue Smart, all the big companies or startups that are building are usually building for tier 1 or tier 2, right? At max, like we'd see this big focus on the metros, and we also see this big focus on areas where English, Hindi are a lot more. There's a lot more dominance, right? So north side specifically metros is something it's a little easier to capture, and also the target market is very, very good. But what a lot of players are usually struggle to do is actually expand to the south side. Right now, I think I mentioned briefly that Swiggy had a big dominance because of their early first mover advantage, right? And I don't know if you know this, Rakshit, but Swiggy was headquartered in Bangalore, right? And obviously, as the legend goes, where the company is headquartered, the dominance is usually present, right? It's true, right? I mean, Swiggy has a big market share in Bangalore itself, right? And for the longest time, Zomato has not been able to crack it, which feels so weird, because in my head I thought Zomato is like really, really big and it has like a really strong presence everywhere. But you'd see these areas where Swiggy is still leading the game, right? Which is just on that first mover advantage.
Yeah.
So a lot of, after speaking to some of the people in the team, right, I realized that they've also been having growing focus on building for south, right? And the thing with the south market, very honestly, I'll tell you, Rakshit, right, I've also done campaigns towards the south segment. What I've realized is that the south market, if you connect with them in the language that they would like to engage with you, they are much easier to sort of crack. I don't want to
Interesting
sound
insight.
unethical here, but but
No,
but there's a
makes
lot of
sense.
naivety, or I don't know how I'd frame this, but people towards the south are very willing to engage with your product if you communicate in their language, right? So I've seen this very commonly. And to be very honest, another thing I would see is that the cost to acquire the south region is very low. Now that
Oh.
might be because of the cost of the living. Now, for example, one of my friends stays in Kerala, and the kind of rent they'd be paying is barely like 5-10,000 per month, right, for a very big house, right? So it's very interesting that because of the standard of living
Interesting
and cost
insight.
of living in the south side, the acquisition cost is slightly lower in some of the south regions. And if you can connect with them in the regional language, you have cracked it, mate, right? Which is why you'd see, when we're discussed in the case of urban company, right, they deployed a team towards the south. They started doing TVCs in Tamil, Telugu languages, right? And this is what Zomato has also been adopting over the years, which is its growing focus towards also expanding a lot more in the south regions, right? Because it's not just about having a download; it's also about engaging the users a lot in every region, right? And this is why they also have teams deployed on at a region level, right, south side, and they've also been partnering with local brands and local branding teams to understand the south market and build from there, right? You'd see some of these people running ads in Gujarat, in Gujarati, in like Telugu, in Tamil, right? That's what was very
Interesting.
interesting to sort of conquer some of the regions that are more language oriented. With that said, that's a wrap on today's episode, right? Hopefully, a lot of you learned a lot more about what Zomato has been doing, because, very honestly, when we and Rakshit were first researching, we felt that this company is, like pretty much working underground and is like humongously famous, right? But there's so much not known to the average consumer about the company. But hopefully, you learned a lot. If you like this video, obviously share it with a friend, share with your family, and make sure you join the Perspectify community, where we are hosting so many debates and discussions on a daily basis on marketing, product, and growth initiatives happening all around India. So, with that said, that's a wrap. Take care. Have a good day.